My name is Madison Lawrence. I'm 32 years old, and for the last decade, I've spent every Christmas feeling like an afterthought in my own family. This year was supposed to be different. I had finally built something incredible, something that would force them to see me. But as I sat at the gleaming dining table, watching everyone unwrap lavish gifts while my own place setting remained conspicuously bare, I realized some patterns never change. Little did they know, I wasn't just Madison, the forgotten middle child anymore. Now, I had an empire. Are you listening from somewhere comfortable? If so, settle in, and let me tell you how I finally flipped the script. Growing up as the middle child between two high-achieving siblings was like living in a permanent shadow. My older brother Tyler, now 36, was always the golden boy. He sailed through school with perfect grades, charmed every teacher, and eventually graduated from Harvard Medical School. Now, he's a respected cardiologist with a perfect wife, two adorable children, and a house in Boston's most exclusive neighborhood. Every conversation about Tyler included words like brilliant and exceptional. My parents practically glowed whenever they spoke of him. Then there was my younger sister, Rebecca. At 28, she was the one who had inherited every last drop of our family's beauty. By 16, she was modeling for local boutiques. By 20, she'd signed with a major agency in New York. Now, her face graces magazine covers and billboards across the country. She's gorgeous, charismatic, and people are just naturally drawn to her. My mother keeps a scrapbook of every ad and editorial Rebecca appears in, proudly displaying it to anyone who visits. And then there was me, Madison, perpetually stuck in the middle. Not brilliant enough to compete with Tyler, not beautiful enough to compete with Rebecca. Just average. At least that's how my family made me feel. My solid B-plus grades were met with, well, Tyler only ever got A's. My sensible career choices were compared to, Rebecca knew exactly what she wanted at your age. Every accomplishment I managed somehow became smaller when filtered through the lens of my siblings' success. Our family Christmases always highlighted this dynamic perfectly. The Lawrence family tradition involved extravagant gift exchanges that felt more like a performance than a celebration. My parents, Janet and William, spared no expense on these displays of affection, except when it came to me. I still remember the Christmas I was 16. Tyler got a brand new car with a giant red bow on it in the driveway. Rebecca got a trip to Paris for a pre-college cultural experience. I got a gift card to a bookstore and a generic sweater. When I tried to hide my disappointment, my mother said, "Madison, don't be ungrateful. Not everyone needs something flashy." That pattern continued, year after year. One Christmas, Tyler received an expensive watch befitting a future doctor, while Rebecca got designer clothes for her burgeoning career. I got bath products from the mall. Another year, my parents gifted Tyler the down payment for his first house, and Rebecca a set of connections at a top modeling agency. I got a set of kitchen appliances, because you're just so practical, Madison. Whenever I tried to address the disparity, I was told I was being too sensitive or making everything a competition. My feelings were so consistently invalidated that I started to believe it myself. Maybe I was overreacting. Maybe I didn't deserve the same consideration or investment. That belief took root deep inside me, shaping how I saw myself and my place in the family. The turning point came during my junior year at the university. My parents had pressured me into attending, despite my desire to study elsewhere. I was miserable, pursuing a business degree I had no passion for, trying to meet expectations that felt impossible. After one particularly grim phone call with my father about my disappointing grades, I made a decision that scandalized my family. I dropped out. The fallout was as dramatic as I'd expected. My father refused to speak to me for weeks. My mother wept about wasted opportunities. Tyler lectured me on responsibility, and Rebecca simply couldn't understand why anyone would quit something so certain. Not one of them bothered to ask what I planned to do instead. With what was left of my college fund, which was considerably smaller than what my siblings had received, I moved to Seattle, clear across the country. I needed distance, both physical and emotional, to figure out who I was outside the confines of being the Lawrence family's middle child. For years after that, our relationship was reduced to obligatory holiday visits and occasional phone calls filled with subtle digs about my choices. "How's that little internet thing going?" my father would ask dismissively. "Still fiddling with websites?" Or my mother, her voice laced with concern. "Don't you think it's time to find something more stable, dear?" Even my siblings joined in. Tyler would offer to put in a word with some people about real jobs, while Rebecca suggested I could at least try modeling for local commercials. "They need average-looking people too," she'd said, trying to be helpful. What they didn't know, what I deliberately kept from them, was that my internet thing was becoming a staggering success. It started small, with an e-commerce site I built from scratch, selling custom-designed planners for entrepreneurs. I taught myself to code late into the night, studied business strategy on my lunch breaks from my day job, and reinvested every single penny of profit. While my family assumed I was barely scraping by, I was secretly expanding into multiple digital ventures: a subscription service for business tools, an online education platform, and eventually, a suite of productivity apps that caught the eye of major investors. I kept every success quiet, partly because I knew they wouldn't understand or validate it, but mostly because I was still seeking their approval on their terms, not mine. I saw the irony in it. The very skills my family dismissed, my creativity, my adaptability, my understanding of the digital landscape, were precisely what led to my success. While they were looking backward at traditional paths, I was building something for the future. But old habits die hard, and every Christmas I would return home, hoping that this year, somehow, would be different. This year, they would see me. This December marked 5 years since I launched my company and 10 years since I'd left college. As the holiday approached, I seriously considered skipping the annual Lawrence family Christmas for the first time. My assistant had already researched luxury resorts in Bali, where I could spend a quiet week instead of subjecting myself to the usual pattern of disappointment. "You could just send gifts and be done with it," Natalie suggested, laying the glossy brochures on my desk. "No one would blame you." I ran a finger over the image of an infinity pool overlooking the ocean. The escape was tempting. After all, I had built a life where I could go anywhere, do anything. Why choose discomfort? But something in me needed closure. Maybe it was the milestone my business had just hit, or maybe it was just time to stop waiting for a validation I might never receive. Whatever the reason, I found myself saying, "Book the flight home, but keep Bali on standby." The truth was, despite everything, I still held a tiny, flickering hope that this Christmas might be different. My company, Annex Platforms, had just acquired our largest competitor in a move that sent ripples through the tech industry. The acquisition was featured in Forbes, with my portrait splashed across a 2-page spread under the headline, "The Silent Disruptor: How Madison Lawrence Built a Digital Empire." The company's valuation had officially hit 9 figures, and industry insiders were calling me a revolutionary. For the first time, I had tangible, undeniable proof of my success, the kind of proof that not even my status-obsessed family could ignore. Maybe now they would finally see me, not as the disappointing middle child, but as the woman who had created something meaningful on her own terms. I prepared modestly wrapped gifts for everyone: a first-edition book my father had mentioned wanting years ago, a vintage brooch for my mother that matched her favorites, a donation to a medical research foundation in Tyler's name, and a weekend spa retreat for Rebecca. I didn't choose them to impress, but to show that, despite it all, I had been listening all these years. The trip back to the Connecticut suburb where I grew up felt like traveling through time. As the Uber pulled up to my parents' colonial-style mansion, draped in perfectly strung garlands and twinkling white lights, I took a deep breath. The house looked exactly the same, a monument to the tradition and stability my parents valued above all else. My mother answered the door, a look of polite surprise on her face, as if she hadn't been the one to confirm my arrival time. "Madison, you made it," she said, offering a brief Chanel No. 5 scented hug. She stepped back to appraise me. "You look professional." Inside, the house was buzzing with activity. Tyler and his wife Amanda were arranging presents under the 12-foot Christmas tree, while their children, Emma and Ethan, played with electronics far too expensive for their age. Rebecca was lounging gracefully on the sofa, scrolling through her phone and occasionally showing something to our father, who chuckled with delight. "Look who it is," my mother announced without much fanfare. "Madison made it after all." Tyler glanced up. "Hey, Maddie, glad you could fit us in." The nickname I'd always hated. The jab at my absence. Rebecca barely looked up from her phone. "Nice sweater. Is it new?" It wasn't. I'd worn it last Christmas, too. My father finally acknowledged my presence. "Madison, hope the trip wasn't too difficult." He immediately turned his attention back to whatever Rebecca was showing him. I placed my gifts under the tree and offered to help with dinner preparations, but my mother waved me away. "Oh, Amanda and I have a system. Too many cooks and all that. Why don't you just relax?" So I sat on the periphery of my family's activities, watching them move in their familiar choreography that somehow always excluded me. Tyler regaled everyone with stories from the hospital, while Rebecca shared gossip about celebrities she'd met on photo shoots. When I tried to mention my company's recent growth, my father cut in to ask Tyler his opinion on the stock market. Later that evening, I overheard a conversation I wasn't meant to. Paused in the hallway outside the kitchen, I froze as my mother's voice carried through the half-open door. "Did you finalize Rebecca's gift?" she asked my father. "All set. The apartment will be ready by the new year. She's going to be thrilled, and Tyler's investment account is opened. A nice head start for Emma and Ethan's college funds." There was a pause before my mother added, "Should we have gotten something for Madison? She came all this way." My father's reply was dismissive. "What would we even get her? She doesn't need anything practical, and she's never liked the things we've picked out before. Besides, we weren't really expecting her to come." "I suppose you're right. She seems to be doing fine on her own anyway." I retreated silently to the guest room, the familiar ache of exclusion settling deep in my chest. Nothing had changed. Even now, they couldn't see past their perceptions of who I was, or rather, who I wasn't. That night, I lay awake, torn between confronting them and just enduring one more Christmas as an afterthought. Part of me wanted to leave right then, to abandon this futile hope for recognition. But another part of me, the entrepreneur who had learned to see challenges as opportunities, thought that maybe, just maybe, there was a different approach. I decided to wait, to see how Christmas Day unfolded. If the pattern held, perhaps it was time they saw exactly what their forgotten middle child had become. Christmas morning at the Lawrence house was always a carefully orchestrated event, and this year was no exception. I woke to the sound of carols coming from the grand piano in the living room, where my father played holiday songs while my mother supervised the household staff arranging the breakfast buffet. The aroma of cinnamon rolls, bacon, and fresh coffee filled the air. By the time I came downstairs, everyone was already gathered in the living room. Tyler's children were playing with new toys that had clearly been opened early, while the adults sipped mimosas and chatted animatedly. "There she is," my mother said, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "We didn't want to wake you. You must have been exhausted from your trip." The truth was, no one had bothered to tell me the family would be gathering early. It was a small but familiar exclusion. The house was, as always, impeccably decorated. Fresh garlands adorned every doorway, hand-blown glass ornaments graced the massive tree, and holiday-themed artwork replaced the usual paintings. It was a showcase of Christmas perfection my mother had likely spent weeks planning. "Madison, would you mind giving a hand in the kitchen?" my mother asked, even though Tyler's wife, Amanda, was already tied up in an apron and helping. "Rebecca needs to protect her hands for a photo shoot next week, and Tyler is entertaining the children." In the kitchen, I was relegated to peeling potatoes while Amanda and my mother orchestrated more complex dishes, their conversation drifting to a charity event they had both attended. When I tried to join in, the topic abruptly shifted to Amanda's interior designer, someone, of course, I didn't know. After an hour of prep, we gathered for the traditional Lawrence family Christmas photo by the tree. I was positioned at the very edge of the group, easily cropped out, should the need arise. Then came the elaborate dinner my mother had been planning for months. The dining table stretched the full length of the room, draped in Irish linen and set with the ved-vod china reserved for special occasions. Elegant, calligraphed place cards marked everyone's seat. Mine was at the opposite end, next to my young niece and nephew, while my parents, Tyler and Rebecca, occupied the center, the heart of the flowing conversation. As the first course was served, a kabocha squash soup with a drizzle of truffle oil, my father raised his glass. "A toast," he began, "to family and to another blessed year. Tyler, congratulations on the new research grant for your department. Rebecca, your Vogue cover was spectacular. To continued success." Glasses clinked around the table. My own remained untouched as I waited for some acknowledgement of my presence, but none came. Throughout the meal, the conversation orbited my siblings' achievements. Tyler recounted plans for a medical conference he was attending in Switzerland. Rebecca shared details of her upcoming campaign for a luxury fashion brand. My parents beamed with pride, asking follow-up questions and offering enthusiastic support. When I mentioned my company's recent acquisition, my mother absent-mindedly acknowledged it before pivoting back to Rebecca. "Darling, tell everyone about that director you met at the charity ball." By the time dessert was served, individual Christmas puddings dusted with crystallized sugar, I had fallen silent. Years of this treatment had taught me that fighting for attention only made the exclusion more painful. Instead, I focused on helping my niece cut her dessert, finding a small measure of comfort in her innocent chatter about Santa Claus. After dinner came the main event, the Lawrence family gift exchange. This tradition had always been my father's domain. He would stand by the tree, selecting presents one by one, delivering a short speech about each recipient before they opened their gift. It was theatrical and over the top, but it was our tradition. "First," my father announced, plucking an envelope tied with a gold ribbon, "for Tyler and his beautiful family." Tyler accepted the envelope, opening it to reveal documents for an investment account. "We've established a college fund for Emma and Ethan," my father explained, $100,000 to start, with annual contributions to follow. Tyler hugged our parents as Amanda thanked them effusively. "That is incredibly generous," she said. "The children are so blessed to have you as grandparents." Next came Rebecca's gift, a set of keys in a small velvet box. "For our rising star," my father said, his voice thick with pride. "A pied-à-terre in Manhattan. We know the commute from Connecticut has been tiring you out, and you deserve a beautiful space in the city." Rebecca shrieked with delight, leaping up to embrace them. "It's exactly what I wanted! You're the best!" One by one, other family members received their presents. A luxury cruise for my aunt and uncle, a sports car for my recently graduated cousin. Even the household staff received generous envelopes that brought wide smiles to their faces. I sat patiently, waiting for my name to be called as the pile of gifts dwindled, a familiar knot tightening in my stomach. Still, I maintained my composure, smiling politely as others exclaimed over their gifts. Finally, the last present was distributed, a set of golf clubs for my father's brother, and my father stepped back, clapping his hands together decisively. "Well, that's everything. Shall we move to the living room for coffee?" A heavy silence fell over the room as everyone realized what had just happened. I had been completely overlooked. No gift, no acknowledgement, not even a token gesture to keep up appearances. My mother was the first to notice, her eyes widening slightly. "William," she said quietly to my father, "didn't we have something for Madison?" My father looked momentarily confused, then flustered. "Ah, yes," he stammered, clearly caught off guard. "Well, Madison, it seems your gift was delayed in shipping. These supply chain issues, you know. We'll have it sent to your apartment when it arrives." It was a blatant lie. We all knew it. Rebecca, to her credit, had the decency to look uncomfortable, while Tyler suddenly found his water glass fascinating. The family shifted awkwardly in their seats. In years past, I might have played along, swallowing my hurt to maintain the family's harmonious facade. I might have offered to help with the dishes, making myself useful to distract from the humiliation. But this year was different. This year, I had finally built something I was proud of, something that had value in the world beyond this dining room and its fraught dynamics. This year, I didn't need their validation, but perhaps they needed to understand the consequences of their actions. I carefully placed my napkin down and smiled. "That's all right. Actually, I have something I'd like to share with all of you." The room went quiet as I pushed back my chair and stood. I could feel their eyes on me, likely expecting me to retreat to the guest room in a hurt, disappointed silence, as I had so many times before. Instead, I walked calmly to the entryway where my suitcase was, unzipped the front pocket, and pulled out a glossy magazine and a slim portfolio. When I returned to the dining room, my family had lapsed into strained, informal conversation, clearly trying to move past the uncomfortable moment. My father was pouring more wine, my mother was fussing with dessert plates, and my siblings were staring at their phones, a classic Lawrence avoidance tactic. I cleared my throat as I took a position at the head of the table, the seat my father usually occupied. All eyes turned to me with varying degrees of curiosity and apprehension. "I thought this might be a good time to share some news," I said, my voice steady. I placed the magazine on the table and slid it to the center, where everyone could see the latest issue of Forbes, with my portrait featured prominently on the cover. "What is this?" my father asked, picking it up. "That," I replied, "is the December issue of Forbes, featuring a cover story on how I built my company from the ground up to a 9-figure valuation in 5 years." A collective intake of breath swept through the room. Tyler took the magazine, his eyebrows raised as he scanned the article. "Nexus Platforms. This is your company?" "Yes, the company I founded after I dropped out of college, the decision you all so vehemently criticized. The internet thing, as Dad always dismissed it. The hobby, as Mom suggested I give up for a real career." I opened the portfolio and laid out the documents one by one: financial statements, acquisition papers, property deeds. Last month, we acquired our largest competitor in an $87 million deal. Our user base has grown to over 15 million worldwide. We employ 300 people across 4 offices. I paused, letting the information sink in. "And yes, I own 62% of the company." My mother's hand trembled as she reached for her wineglass. "Madison, why didn't you tell us?" "I've tried to tell you for years. I've tried to share my work with you, but you were never interested. Every time I mentioned my business, the subject was changed. Every milestone was met with indifference." I met each of their gazes directly. "Why would I keep trying to share something you so clearly place no value on?" Rebecca stared at the magazine, her perfectly manicured finger tracing my name in the headline. "It says here, you're worth over $100 million, she said, her voice barely a whisper. $118 million as of last month's valuation," I confirmed. "More than everyone in this room combined." My father's face underwent a remarkable transformation, from confusion to disbelief, and finally to the calculated interest I recognized from his own business dealings. "Madison, this is extraordinary. You should have told us. We could have helped, advised you." "Could you have?" I countered gently. "You've never understood the digital economy, Dad. You made that clear every time you called it a passing fad or a bubble about to burst." I turned to address everyone at the table. "I'm not sharing this to boast or to make anyone uncomfortable, but after years of being overlooked and undervalued in this family, after sitting through yet another Christmas where I am literally the only person not to receive a gift, not even a token one, I thought it was time to be honest." The silence that followed was profound. My Aunt Julia was the first to speak. "Madison, we had no idea. Your parents always just said you were finding yourself, trying different things." "Because it was easier than admitting they didn't understand or approve of my choices," I replied. "Easier than acknowledging that their middle child didn't fit their narrative of success." My mother's face flushed. "That's not fair, Madison. We've always supported you." "Have you?" I asked softly. "When was the last time you asked about my work with genuine interest? When have you ever celebrated my achievements the way you celebrate Tyler's or Rebecca's? When have you ever made me feel as valued as my siblings?" The discomfort around the table was palpable. Tyler shifted in his seat, looking troubled. "Maddie, come on. Nobody meant to make you feel less than." Intent and impact are two different things, Tyler. And it's Madison, not Maddie. I've asked you not to call me that since we were teenagers. The simple assertion of this boundary, something I would never have done in the past, seemed to startle him into silence. Rebecca, ever quick to adapt to shifting social dynamics, was the first to try and align herself with my new status. "This is incredible, Madison. I always knew you were brilliant. Do you need models for any of your ad campaigns? I could connect you with my agency." The transparent attempt to leverage my success might have stung in the past. Now, it simply confirmed what I'd always suspected about our relationship. "Thank you, but we work with a wonderful agency in Seattle that specializes in tech." I smiled politely. They prioritize diversity and authentic representation in their campaigns. My father had regained his composure, slipping into the corporate persona I recognized from his own career challenges. "Madison, we need to discuss your future plans. Have you considered taking the company public? I know several investment bankers who—" "Dad," I interrupted gently, "my company has one of the top IPO specialists in the country on retainer. We are planning our strategy very carefully." The look of surprise on his face would have been comical in another context. He wasn't used to being shut down, especially not by me. Relatives who had never shown much interest in my life were now watching me with a newfound respect. My cousin Sarah, who had barely spoken 2 words to me earlier, now eyed me with open curiosity. "So you live in Seattle now? In, like, a mansion or something?" "I have a penthouse downtown and a cabin on Lake Washington," I answered simply, "but I travel frequently." As the initial shock wore off, the dynamic in the room began to shift. Family members who had been clustered around Tyler and Rebecca now found reasons to drift over to my end of the table. Conversations that had once excluded me were now punctuated with expectant glances, inviting me to join. It was everything I had once desperately wanted: to be seen, to be included, to be valued. But now that it was happening, I recognized it for what it was: an interest predicated on what I could offer, not on who I was. My mother, ever the gracious hostess even in duress, tried to regain control of the evening. "Well, what wonderful news to celebrate. William, perhaps we should open that special bottle of champagne we've been saving." "That won't be necessary," I said, gathering my documents. "I won't be staying." "What do you mean?" my father asked, genuinely stunned. "It's Christmas. Where would you go?" "I've booked a suite at the Four Seasons in the city. My car is waiting." "But it's family time," my mother protested, a note of panic in her voice. Her perfect family Christmas was unraveling, and she didn't know how to stop it. "Yes," I agreed softly, "it is family time, and for years I have sat through these gatherings feeling like an outsider. It's become very clear tonight that nothing has changed. The only difference is that I now value myself enough to walk away from situations that diminish me." I placed the magazine and documents back in my portfolio and looked around the table. "I wish you all a very Merry Christmas. The gifts I brought for you are under the tree. I hope you enjoy them." As I turned to leave, Tyler stood up abruptly. "Madison, wait! You can't just drop this bomb and walk out." I paused at the door. "I'm not dropping a bomb, Tyler. I'm just sharing the truth of my life. Something I would have done years ago if anyone had been interested enough to listen." With that, I walked out of the dining room, through the lavishly decorated foyer, and out the front door into the cold December night, where my car was, indeed, waiting. They didn't have a gift for me, not even a token one. "So, you showed them the magazine and the portfolio?" You should have seen their faces. Natalie was quiet for a moment. "Was it satisfying? To finally show them who you've become?" I considered the question carefully. It wasn't about satisfaction. It was about finally owning my truth, without apology. For the first time, I didn't shrink myself to fit their expectations. "I'm proud of you," she said simply. "What happens now?" I don't know, I admitted, but whatever it is, it will be on my terms. After we hung up, I decided to look at my messages. My mother's texts were a jumble of apologies and justifications. We didn't know you were doing so well. You should have told us, Ian. Please come back. We can fix this. My father was more direct. We need to discuss your business. I have contacts who can help. Tyler's messages were unexpectedly thoughtful. I never realized how we were making you feel. Can we talk? Rebecca's approach was predictably self-centered. OMG, Maddie, this is insane. We have so much to catch up on. Also, do you need a brand spokesperson? I have availability next quarter. The rest were variations on a theme, a sudden interest in my life, veiled inquiries about potential opportunities, and invitations to connect. The transparency was almost refreshing after years of subtle rejection. A knock at the door announced the arrival of room service. As I savored my meal in quiet solitude, I reflected on how different this Christmas was from the one I'd expected. I had come home hoping for acknowledgement, maybe even reconciliation. Instead, I'd found clarity and, surprisingly, a sense of liberation. My phone rang again. My father. After a moment's hesitation, I answered. Madison, he began, his voice laced with the authoritative tone he used in business negotiations. This behavior is unacceptable. You've upset your mother and ruined Christmas dinner. Some things never change. Hello to you too, Dad, I said. Don't be flippant. You can't just drop a bombshell like that and walk out. It's childish and unprofessional. I took a deep breath. Is that really why you called? Because if it is, this conversation is over. The silence on the other end of the line suggested my response had caught him off guard. I had never spoken to him like that before. Look, he said finally, his tone shifting to one I recognized from when he was trying to close a deal. I think we got off on the wrong foot. Your success is impressive. Frankly, I'm proud of what you've accomplished. But you have to understand how this looks, you hiding it from us. I didn't hide it, Dad. I tried to share it with you many times. You weren't interested. That's not true, he protested, though without conviction. Last Thanksgiving, I mentioned my company had secured significant funding. You changed the subject to Tyler's new boat. 2 Christmases ago, I tried to tell Mom about our second office opening, and she asked Rebecca to show everyone her new magazine spread. The silence stretched between us. The truth is, I continued, my success doesn't fit the narrative you've created for me. It's easier for you to see me as the disappointment, the one who couldn't measure up, than to acknowledge that maybe you were wrong about my choices. That's unfair, Madison. Is it? Then explain to me why, after 32 years, I'm still the only one who doesn't get a meaningful gift at Christmas. Explain why my accomplishments are consistently ignored while Tyler and Rebecca are celebrated for every minor achievement. When he spoke again, his voice had lost its edge. We didn't know. About the magazine, about your company's valuation. And that is exactly the problem. My value to this family has always been conditional on external validation. If Forbes says I'm successful, suddenly I matter. But all the years of hard work before that, the courage it took to forge my own path, none of that was valuable to you. There was another long pause. Your mother wants you to come back, he said finally. We'll have lunch tomorrow. The whole family will be there. I don't think that's a good idea. I need some space. Madison, he said, and I detected a note of genuine confusion in his voice. What is it you want from us? It was a question I hadn't expected, and it made me realize that, for all his bluster, my father truly didn't understand. I don't want anything from you, Dad. That's the point. For years, I wanted your approval, your recognition. I wanted to be valued the way you value Tyler and Rebecca. But I don't need that anymore. I've built a life that fulfills me, with people who see me and appreciate me for who I am. After we hung up, I got a text from my mother asking if she could visit me at the hotel the next day. I agreed to meet her for coffee in the lobby. Whatever happened next, I knew things between us would never be the same, and that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Later that night, as I sat by the window watching the snow fall over the city, I realized the hollow feeling I'd carried for so many Christmases had been replaced by something else. Not quite happiness, but a quiet sense of peace. I had finally stopped waiting for my family to see my worth and had fully claimed it for myself. My phone buzzed with another text. It was from Tyler. "Can we talk? Like really talk when things calm down? I think I owe you an apology," he wrote. Several, actually. It was the first genuine communication I'd had from my brother in years. "I'd like that," I typed back. As I got ready for bed, I thought about how strange it was that my family's failure to give me a gift had in the end given me something far more valuable: the courage to finally stand in my own truth. The days following Christmas unfolded in ways I could not have predicted. News of my success spread through the extended family like wildfire. Suddenly, relatives who had barely acknowledged me at past gatherings were reaching out with congratulatory messages and invitations to lunch. My cousin Allison, who had always been closer to Rebecca, posted a childhood photo of us with the caption, "So proud of my brilliant cousin Madison and everything she's accomplished. #girlboss, #family pride." Despite us not having a real conversation in over a decade, my Uncle David, my father's brother and business partner, called to discuss potential synergies between my company and his investment firm. When I politely declined, citing our different market approaches, he seemed genuinely taken aback. The idea that I might not want or need his business connections had never occurred to him. Most telling were the emails from distant relatives and family friends, asking if I might have opportunities for their children or grandchildren. "Sarah is graduating from business school this spring and would love to learn from someone as successful as you," wrote my mother's cousin, a woman I'd met maybe 3 times in my life. I set firm boundaries with these opportunistic overtures, responding with polite but non-committal messages. For the more sincere inquiries, I offered to connect people with our HR department through the proper channels, the same opportunity available to any qualified applicant. The morning after Christmas, I met my mother in the hotel lobby as planned. She seemed smaller, her usual confident posture diminished. She was dressed impeccably, as always, but her eyes betrayed a sleepless night. "Madison," she began after we'd settled with our coffees, "I don't know where to start." "How about with the truth?" I suggested gently. She fiddled with the diamond bracelet on her wrist, a long-ago anniversary gift from my father. "I never meant to make you feel less than your siblings. You have to believe that." "I believe you didn't intend to hurt me," I acknowledged, but the impact was the same, regardless of the intent. "You were always so different," she went on. "Tyler and Rebecca were easy to understand. Their paths were clear from the start. But you always marched to your own beat. I never knew how to connect with you." "Did you try?" I asked. "Did you ever try to understand what mattered to me, instead of pushing me to fit a mold I wasn't made for?" The question hung in the air between us as she stared into her coffee cup. "I thought I was protecting you," she said finally. "The world rewards certain kinds of success. I wanted that for you. And when I found success on my own terms, where was the celebration?" A tear traced a path down her cheek. I didn't understand it. I didn't recognize it as success because it didn't look like what I thought success was supposed to be. She looked up at me. "That was a failure on my part, not yours." It was perhaps the most honest conversation we had ever had. For the first time, my mother was seeing me, truly seeing me, not as a disappointing reflection of her own expectations, but as the woman I had become. "I can't change the past," she said, "but I would like to understand your present, your life, if you'll let me." It wasn't a magic fix for years of emotional distance, but it was a start. My conversation with Tyler happened 2 days later, over lunch at a quiet restaurant far from any family interference. Unlike our mother, Tyler didn't try to justify or explain his behavior. "I've been a terrible brother," he told me bluntly, "and I didn't even see it until the other night, when Amanda pointed out how I've treated you all these years." I raised an eyebrow. "Amanda said that?" He nodded. "She was furious about what happened at Christmas dinner. Said she's been uncomfortable with how the family treats you for years, but didn't feel it was her place to say anything. He grimaced. She also pointed out that I've been competing with you my whole life, even when you weren't competing with me. Competing? Tyler, you were always the star, the golden child. And I ran myself into the ground trying to maintain that image, he admitted. Do you have any idea how terrifying it is to be the one everyone expects to be perfect? To know that any failure would be magnified because Tyler never fails? I had never considered it from his perspective before. It sounds exhausting. It was. It is. He pushed his food around his plate. When you dropped out of school, part of me was jealous. You had the courage to walk away from expectations that didn't fit you. I never did. You love being a doctor, I pointed out. I do, but I hate the politics, the pressure, the constant comparison to other physicians. Sometimes I wonder if I would have chosen differently if I'd felt I had a real choice. He looked me straight in the eye. Seeing you build something on your own terms made me question everything about my own path. It was easier to dismiss your choices than to examine my own. I'm sorry, he continued, for the nickname you hate, for the dismissive comments, for not sticking up for you with Mom and Dad, for all of it. Later that week, Rebecca invited me to her apartment in the city, not the new one from our parents, but her actual place, a stylish loft in a trendy neighborhood. Unlike Tyler, whose apology had been direct, Rebecca approached our relationship sideways. You looked amazing in that magazine feature, she said effusively, pouring us each a glass of expensive champagne. Who's your stylist? You should let me introduce you to mine. It was a typical Rebecca approach, focused on the surface, trying to find common ground through the external rather than the internal. But as our conversation went on, unexpected moments of authenticity broke through. Do you know why I started modeling? She asked abruptly after her second glass. I shook my head. Because you're beautiful and photogenic? She laughed, but it wasn't her usual melodic sound. Because it was the one thing I knew I could do that neither you nor Tyler could compete with. You two were so smart, always reading and discussing things I didn't understand. But being pretty, that was mine. Rebecca, you're not just pretty, you're smart too. She waved that away. Not like you and Tyler. I learned early on that my currency was in my appearance. I leaned into it because at least there I could excel. She gave me a searching look. Do you know what it's like to have your entire worth tied to something that's inevitably going to fade? Something you have almost no control over? I knew what it was like to have your worth tied to external metrics instead of intrinsic value, but I hadn't realized Rebecca felt the same insecurity, just from a different angle. I was jealous when I saw that magazine, she admitted, not of your money or your success, but of the way they wrote about you, your intelligence, your vision, your impact. No one ever writes about me like that. It's not too late to build something different, I told her. You have more to offer than your looks. She looked skeptical, but thoughtful. Maybe. I wouldn't even know what that looks like. Neither did I when I started, I reminded her. That's what building your own path is for. As winter turned to spring, my relationship with my family began to shift in subtle but meaningful ways. My father, always more comfortable with actions than emotions, started sending me articles about the tech industry with notes like, "Thought this might interest you," or "Would love your take on this." My mother made an effort to learn about my business, asking questions that showed she was genuinely trying to understand. Tyler and I set up monthly video calls that became a surprisingly important connection for both of us. Rebecca started taking online business classes, exploring interests beyond modeling for the first time. None of these changes erased the past or instantly healed old wounds. There were still awkward moments, misunderstandings, and the occasional slip back into familiar patterns. But there was also a new foundation of honesty and mutual respect that hadn't existed before. The most profound changes, however, were happening within me. The recognition I had once so desperately sought from my family no longer defined my sense of self-worth. I had proven to myself, more than to anyone, that I could create something meaningful on my own terms. This inner transformation rippled outward into my professional life. I began to use my platform to champion overlooked entrepreneurs, especially women and minorities in tech who, like me, didn't fit the conventional mold of success. We created a mentorship program and a venture capital fund specifically for founders from underrepresented backgrounds. The company culture I built deliberately countered the hierarchical structure I grew up with. At Nexus, every voice was valued, every perspective considered. We celebrated diverse forms of achievement, recognizing that innovation springs from many different kinds of intelligence and creativity. As the next Christmas approached, I received the expected invitation for the family gathering. This time, however, it was accompanied by a personal note from my mother. "We understand if you decide not to join us," it read, "but we're working on being better, and we would love to have you here. Either way, we are proud of you." It was a small thing, just a few handwritten sentences, but it represented a seismic shift in our family dynamic. For the first time, my choice was respected, my boundaries acknowledged. My presence was requested, not assumed or required. After careful consideration, I decided to go, not out of obligation or the hope of validation, but from a position of strength and a belief that relationships, like people, can grow and evolve when given the chance. A year later, I found myself driving to my parents' house for Christmas once again. So much had changed since that dramatic revelation and departure last December. My company had continued to thrive, expanding into international markets and launching a foundation focused on digital literacy in underserved communities. Personally, I had finally found a balance between work and well-being, splitting my time between Seattle and a newly acquired beach house where I could disconnect and recharge. The Lawrence family Christmas was different this year. The decorations were still impeccable, but there was a subtle shift in the atmosphere. For one, my parents had hired a photographer to capture candid moments rather than the usual formal portrait by the tree. More significantly, the dinner seating was arranged in a circle instead of the hierarchical rectangle of years past, with no head-of-the-table positions to signify greater importance. The gift exchange, once a carefully orchestrated performance led by my father, was reimagined. Instead of him doling out presents with lengthy speeches, we had adopted a new tradition. Each person chose a gift for one family member, drawn by lot at Thanksgiving. The focus was on thoughtfulness, not monetary value, with each gift giver sharing the reason they had chosen their specific present. My mother had drawn my name. When her turn came, she seemed uncharacteristically nervous as she handed me a small, neatly wrapped package. "I struggled with what to get you," she admitted. "Nothing felt quite right. But then I realized what you'd appreciate most isn't something new, but something that acknowledges the past." Inside the box was a delicate silver locket. When I opened it, I found a tiny photograph of me at about 10 years old, sitting cross-legged on the floor with a computer, my first one, surrounded by books, looking completely absorbed in whatever I was creating. "I found this while going through old photos," my mother explained. "It struck me that this was you, the real you, even back then, creating, building, seeing possibilities the rest of us couldn't yet see. I should have recognized and celebrated that spirit instead of trying to redirect it." It was perhaps the most meaningful gift she had ever given me, not for its monetary value, but because it represented her effort to truly see and acknowledge who I had always been. Tyler gave Rebecca resources for the small beauty channel she had started, one focused on age-positive skincare rather than the youth-focused content that dominated the industry. Rebecca gave our father a series of shared experiences, cooking classes, wine tastings, activities that would build connection rather than just add items to his collection. The shifts in our family dynamic weren't perfect or complete. There were still moments of tension, old patterns that surfaced unconsciously, assumptions that needed to be challenged. But there was also a new willingness to address these things directly, instead of sweeping them under the rug of polite conversation and performance. After dinner, I found myself sitting in the kitchen with Tyler while everyone else was in the living room playing a board game. He was uncharacteristically contemplative, staring into his glass of whiskey. You know what I realized this year? He asked. I've spent my whole adult life chasing external markers of success, the right schools, the right specialty, the right neighborhood. I was so focused on hitting the milestones, I never stopped to ask if they were the right milestones for me. Are they? I asked. He shrugged. Some are, some aren't. I love being a doctor, but I'm tired of the politics. Amanda and I have been talking about moving to a smaller community where I can practice in a more holistic way. Less prestige, but more meaning. Mom and Dad would have a fit, I observed. He laughed. Probably, but I think I'm finally ready to make decisions without worrying about their approval. He met my eye and gave me a small toast. I had a good teacher in that department. Over the next year, I worked with a therapist to process the complex emotions surrounding my family relationships. It wasn't always easy to confront the ways childhood patterns had shaped my adult behaviors and expectations. There were sessions where I left feeling raw and exposed, having peeled back another layer of the unconscious belief that I needed to earn my worth through achievement. The interesting thing about family dynamics, my therapist noted during one particularly insightful session, is that they are systems where everyone plays a part. Your parents and siblings weren't villains, and you weren't just a passive victim. You all co-created patterns that served certain functions, even when they were painful. What function did being overlooked serve? I asked. It may have reinforced your drive to succeed on your own. It might have protected you from the suffocating expectations your brother faced, or the narrow focus on appearance your sister experienced. She leaned forward. The point isn't to assign blame, but to recognize the patterns so you can make conscious choices about what to keep and what to change. This perspective helped me view my family with more compassion, recognizing that each of us had been shaped by the same system in different ways. Tyler's perfectionism, Rebecca's focus on appearance, my parents' rigid definitions of success, they were all responses to forces larger than any one individual. Understanding this didn't erase the hurt of past slights, but it helped me release some of the resentment I had been carrying. I could acknowledge the pain while also recognizing that healing didn't require my family to perfectly understand or atone for every past offense. It required me to set boundaries, communicate honestly, and decide what kind of relationship I wanted moving forward. Beyond my immediate family, I had built a chosen family of friends and colleagues who saw and valued me for exactly who I was. Natalie, who had been with me since the company's earliest days, was now my COO and my closest friend. My team at Nexus had become a community bound by shared values and vision. My neighborhood included a diverse group of friends who gathered for regular potlucks where everyone's contribution was equally welcome. These relationships, built on mutual respect and genuine connection, served as a blueprint for what healthy interaction could be. They gave me the strength to engage with my family of origin without desperately seeking their validation. Professionally, the past year had reinforced my commitment to creating technology that connected people rather than isolating them. Nexus expanded beyond productivity tools to develop platforms that facilitated meaningful collaboration and communication, even across distances and differences. Our mission evolved from simply making people more efficient to helping them work together in more humane, sustainable ways. This alignment of personal values and professional purpose brought a sense of fulfillment deeper than any external metric of success ever could. The company's continued growth and profitability were welcome, but they were byproducts of our mission, not the sole measure of our success. As I looked at my family this Christmas, imperfect, evolving, trying to grow in their own ways, I realized that the true empire I had built wasn't just my company. It was the internal foundation of self-worth that allowed me to engage with the world authentically, to build meaningful connections, and to define success on my own terms. The journey had not been easy. There had been painful revelations, difficult conversations, and moments of doubt. But by standing in my truth, I had finally created the possibility for genuine connection with my family, with my colleagues, and most importantly, with myself. The overlooked middle child had become a woman who could not be ignored, nor defined by the expectations of others. The empire I had unveiled was not just financial or professional. It was the sovereignty I had claimed over my own life, and the courage to live it authentically. As we gather around the table, sharing stories and laughter this holiday, I think of your family dynamics. Have you ever felt overlooked or undervalued? How did you find your voice and stand in your truth? I would love to hear your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please click like, subscribe for more stories like this, and share it with anyone who might need a reminder that their worth is not determined by the recognition of others. Thank you for being part of this journey with me, and I wish you a holiday season filled with authentic connection and the courage to be truly seen.